call to order this special ordinance committee meeting of April 14th. Ms. Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Sneddon?
Here.
Councilmember Jordan?
Here.
Chair Gutierrez?
Present.
Thank you.
Have there been any changes to the agenda or consent agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Okay. I'd like to thank everyone for showing up, but I want to make it clear that I'm going to reduce the time of public comment from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, but if you're pooling time, you'll have an additional minute for a total of 3. Because we have so many public commenters, we won't be able to get through all of you within the time that we have before the regular council meeting. All right, with that being said, can we have, oh, yes? Oh, yes. Are there any general public comments on issues that are not related to today's agenda?
And let me make an announcement for those who are watching online. If you are here for general public comment, that's items not on this agenda, please raise your hand within the app. I do have one individual. Let me just make sure that he's not here for the item. Nope, he put his hand down. Go ahead and proceed.
Okay, thank you. All right. With that being said, may we have the staff report, please?
There we go. Much better. Thank you, members of the committee, and I want to welcome our staff, Rosie Deiste, our principal planner to my right, and behind me we've got Brenda Beltz, our planning management analyst, and Ellen Kokinda, our city planner, and Allison DeBusk in the next row back, as well as our city attorney, Ariel, and Tava over there. It's been a full-bred team to bring this to you, so we're happy to start today. Today's ordinance committee hearing is really focusing on the purposes and the goals of the STR ordinance. We want to talk a little bit about background, though you know it's been with us for a while. We're going to go for a high-level ordinance overview and then explain what happened at the Planning Commission on March 5th and review next steps for you. First of all, why are we doing an STR ordinance? This seems like a simple question for those of you that have been following it for a long time, but most critically is your housing element that you certified and adopted and now the state is relying on us to implement calls for this ordinance to be provided through HE 19. Another important point that has been repeated by the city attorney's office is that having an ordinance will create a legal framework by which they can do enforcement moving forward in a much more structured way. It also will provide a way for people to understand how to permit and where they can be. So the ordinance goals, again, is to create a straightforward and reliable permit process, to inform owners, residents, and visitors where and how vacation rentals can be operated, to provide tools for effective enforcement, to address nuisance and neighborhood compatibility issues, which you've heard a lot about, and to create a lower cost overnight accommodation through our home share option in the ordinance. So just a touch on the background. The interdepartmental, this has gone on for a long time, but the interdepartmental team was created in 25, and it includes the city attorney's office. The city public works has participated, city finance department, and of course community development as your MC. We have also had ongoing conversations with the Coastal Commission since April or May of 25, and we have continued with community outreach to many groups. I have another slide about that. We came to your council last August of 25, and we talked about the role of home shares in the ordinance, as well as the license area concept that was put forward by council several years earlier. Then we had Planning Commission reviews in December of 2025 without the full ordinance, and then we had a robust hearing on March 5th, and our staff report talks about that. In terms of the continued outreach, we really went to as many groups as we could consider were stakeholders: the Santa Barbara Association of Realtors, the Santa Barbara Tenants Union, the Mesa Improvement Association, a group from the Braemar Ranch Homeowners Group, local vacation rental industry practitioners, people that manage units, as well as in the last 6 months, Expedia, VRBO, and Airbnb. among others. I want to move here into the ordinance highlights, and just to lay out the understanding of it, there's nomenclature in here that we want to make sure everybody understands. Something called a short-term rental is a dwelling, an entire dwelling unit that's rented for 30 consecutive days or less. If it's 31 days or more, it's a regular rental unit. And a home share is considered a portion of that. It's a dwelling unit that is the primary residence for the host, and it's rented for, in part, less than 30 days. So that's the typical situation where there's a retired homeowner and they only rent out one room. It allows for a stay-in-place option and has been popular in many cities. Just to remind the committee, the city has 2 ordinances effectively, so we have 2 ordinance amendments in your attachments 1 and 2. Inland zoning is Title 30, and coastal zoning is Title 28. These amendments were drafted to be consistent between both ordinances, except there's a couple things that focus short-term rentals in a license area in the coastal zone. Where they're allowed, in the ordinances as drafted before you, and I should have said this before, what you're seeing in your packet and what's being considered today is the exact same text that was in front of the Planning Commission. We haven't made any changes, although there's been, various feedback, but that's why we're here today. In Title 30, the inland area, the non-residential zones that will allow residential or mixed uses, they're going to be allowed in residential or mixed-use zones. So that's the downtown corridor, that's, either side of the State Street all the way up to Upper State Street. They will not be allowed, that's the next slide, in single and two-family zones. In Title 28, alternatively, we've created a license area, which is an exhibit in your packet, and it allows for short-term rentals to be permitted in those license areas, and home shares would be allowed in all zones that allow residential uses. I forgot to say home shares, okay. Where they would not be allowed in the inland area is they would not be allowed in all residential zones inland, not multifamily, not residential single-family or two-family zones. And in the coastal zone, they would be prohibited only in single and two-family residential zones. So that's a structural prohibition in both ordinances. There are also things in the ordinance that require other things to be ineligible, such as accessory dwelling units. You may hear a lot of testimony about this today. Accessory dwelling units came on the scene, some years back as a way to increase housing statewide. So the city has done everything it can to encourage accessory dwelling units, but the primary intent of ADUs was to increase housing, not to allow another income stream for single-family lots. Another ineligible thing is a unit with a recorded covenant, like affordable units have that sort of covenant. And by the way, ADUs also have a covenant that says they may not be used as STRs, so this should not be new news to folks that have those. Employee housing or live-work units and non-habitable spaces like garages or tool sheds are not allowed to have an STR, as well as units that may be in process at some point but have not received their final occupancy. This map shows you the license area and where these would be eligible to get a license. So the purple hatched area in the coastal zone, that's our Title 28 license area. You'll see that it covers a small commercial area on the mesa between Meigs and Cliff, as well as the area around West Beach where we already have a lot of hotels and some single-family and multifamily homes. The lower part of the Milpas corridor, a small area to the east of that, and then Coast Village Road, as well as a small area off Los Patos. This map actually shows you where home shares would be allowed under the ordinances, and that includes almost every area in single-family zones in the coastal zone. Again, the home shares were something that City Council articulated several years ago. It's something that the Coastal Commission is very pleased about, and that's why we are showing them everywhere in the coastal zone that allows a residential use. We wanted to talk, as the ordinance is drafted now, about parking. Short-term rentals and home shares, right as drafted, would need to provide 2 on-site spaces or 3 for homes with 5 or more bedrooms, presuming they have more guests. Development with non-conforming parking would not need to add parking to comply. Would need to. Yeah. I caught myself. Thank you, Brenda. I'm like, yeah, they would have to. So right now, if you came in, and we have a lot of homes like this, with a property downtown, property in the coastal zone that is deficient in the number of parking spaces, you would have to add parking to comply with those parking standards in the first bullet. Other parking restrictions are, as drafted, that tandem parking would only be allowed with a waiver that is granted by Public Works. That's their current policy. They don't like to see people backing out from residential driveways. And that backing out from a garage, driveway, or site for short-term rentals would only be allowed with a waiver. I'm sorry, the first bullet was that tandem parking would only be allowed with a waiver, and that's stacked parking where you have one behind the other. Other requirements in the ordinances include tenant protections, and we tried to comport this with the recent actions that council has taken on tenant protections, so that short-term rentals would not be permitted in units that had been occupied under a long-term rental agreement for the prior 24 months. This is trying to discourage a run on units to turn them into short-term rentals. That there would be a license required, and the city has developed a system that would screen applications, require a pre-inspection of the unit to make sure their application comports with what's on the ground. There would be a documentation of ownership, insurance requirements, and management that the applicant has to write off and agree to. And right now, and this changed during the hearing process, there would be no discretionary hearing for a short-term rental. So staff tried to make it as sleek as possible. Don't laugh. Anyway, that's our miscellaneous requirements. I want to spend some good time now talking about the Planning Commission's feedback, because they really dived into this and tried to give us good structure. For parking spaces, they believe the ordinances as written are too restrictive, and so they suggested some options about allowing existing parking to meet the requirements, which would treat any case like a non-conforming that would be honored moving forward. So if you had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath unit in the West Beach, you could move forward with only 1 parking space. That would be allowing it to be non-conforming. Or you could allow backing out without a waiver by Public Works, which would allow more potential units to get licenses. That's a significant one. And I think we got Public Works concurrence with that after the Planning Commission hearing. So they're, I won't say comfortable with it, but they will accept that, understanding that it's a structure that we're trying to do to facilitate some of these. Transit occupancy tax, we spent a lot of time with our wonderful finance department generating numbers, because this was a question from the Planning Commission about how many we have, what do they pay, et cetera. It's a common theme in the public comment you've seen for today. So currently, and this is again based on finance department's numbers, in the fiscal year of '24, the city received $2.8 million in transit occupancy tax, and this was for just short-term rentals. It was a line item created a couple of years ago. For 2025, it was $4.4 million, and so far at the end of January of '26, we're at $2.7 million. The numbers, primarily relying on the finance department's figures, are that there are 255 units now paying TOT in the coastal zone. Some of those are in the license area, many are not. You will hear a lot about units on the Mesa that is not in the license area because it's single-family zoned. And there are another 23 units paying TOT inland. I wonder. That doesn't sound right to me, but, oh, I'm sorry. Ignore that last bullet. Ignore that last one. We had a change yesterday.
Excuse me,
so-
sorry. When
yeah.
you say ignore the last one, do you mean the entire
The 20
slide or just the
no,
comment?
No. The 23 units paying TOT, that number it was going to be a different number, but it didn't comply, it didn't match what the point was in the first one.
Thank you for
The information we're
clarifying.
trying to make is that there are 65 sites in the license area that may qualify to operate in the coastal license area, depending on the ability to make those standards, like parking, backing out, et cetera. Enforcement for home shares. This was a big topic at the Planning Commission, and they were really concerned about the enforcement function and to prevent them from essentially going underground. The ordinance application criteria would require performance standards to be signed off on by the applicant, like noise, occupancy, parking, notifications, inside and outside the house, a variety of things. And the key here is to understand that the unit descriptions in your license has to be matched also by platform companies. So another concern raised by the Planning Commission was they wanted to make sure that the platform companies will be required to post the license issued by the city. And there's a Senate Bill 346 that was adopted in 2025 that expanded the local agency's enforcement powers. I know we have city attorneys who can explore that better for you, but the point is the ordinance does require that licenses would have to be posted on platforms. So if you're trying to rent a short-term rental and you don't have a license from the city, we would make Airbnb, VRBO also at fault for not listing the license. Again, more on the platform company insurances is that ordinances would ensure that that information is listed on their sites. It's kind of a repeat. The Planning Commission was also really curious about data and program reporting. So they are wondering, well, how many units we had that were already permitted. And currently, because we don't have a permit path, we don't have an ordinance, we don't have a definition of this, we have managed to permit about, actually 24. Are we saying 23? 23.
This didn't get corrected.
I know.
Just keep going.
Okay. 23. 23 would be considered a change in use. It was an awkward process, but that's what we've managed to count on the books, and there are 5 currently pending. The city attorney provides annual updates on enforcement functions through their office, and this is a way that we could provide program reporting to the decision makers once the ordinances are adopted. The short-term rental and home share license data and the TOT collected could also be reported annually. So staff believes that we have a reporting function mostly in place if decision makers wanted to look at it in the future. The Planning Commission spent a while talking about whether we want to stick with this zoning-based approach. And what I mean by that is when I gave you where they're allowed and where they're not allowed, it's based on zone district. They talked about other models such as a geographic cap system or a lottery system where you'd have citywide, you'd say, hey, we can have 350 citywide or some metric. And there are agencies that have successfully gone through the Coastal Commission that have that kind of a paradigm, so they suggested we look into it. For example, the city of Del Mar, which was approved by the Coastal Commission in February of 26, the city of Ventura in March of 26, and Marin County in April of 24, all of these have lottery or cap-based systems, whether it's by geography or citywide, but they have a certain number, and that is a more staff-intensive function, but it spreads the units around the agency. There are also non-coastal communities like Ventura County and Palm Springs that have successful programs in this way. And staff's response was that this would take time at this point for staff to go back out to the public and research what would be a fair metric to decide where to put those. Would you have 25 on the Mesa and 25 in the Riviera area and, 50 downtown and 10 on Coast Village Road? We don't know. I mean, we have to go back to the community and figure out a way to do that if that is something that the committee wants to pursue. So it would be a pause in the program development now, where in terms of decision-making and getting to the Coastal Commission. We have had this conversation with the Coastal Commission, and they have suggested that this is successful, that we look at it. But right now, staff feels like the zoning-based approach is still the best fit for Santa Barbara at this time. Your packet also includes a general plan and local coastal plan consistency analysis, which is lengthy, and it is just an important thing for us to make sure you understand that the ordinances you're reviewing and potentially moving on to council complies with all the elements of your general plan, your housing element, land use element, coastal land use plan, historic resources plans, circulation element, and economy and fiscal health element. So we did that work for you. Also, the California Environmental Quality Act, this ordinance program would actually meet the objectives of Section 15061, which is an exemption. It's a general exemption that relies on the fact that there's no possibility that the ordinances themselves would have a significant effect on the environment. So the next steps is, after your committee discusses this, was to go to City Council for an introduction and adoption. That's slated for May of '26. To continue education and outreach to existing operators to forewarn them of the new law that's coming down the pike. We would need to submit all of this package in Title 28 to the Coastal Commission for a local coastal plan amendment, and that's planned for this summer. And then the anticipated Coastal Commission review, we're hoping would be complete by late '26 or early '27. I didn't mention this earlier, but we did create a web page. We've got so much interest, a short-term rental and web page called Strode, short-term rental ordinance. I've had a lot of jokes about that, but it's there. If you just Google short-term rentals on the city of Santa Barbara, you will find it. And we had a dedicated email for this site too. And that's it.
All right, thank you for that. I'd like to open it up to my colleagues if they have any questions or comments. Mr. Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I have two separate sets of questions. One's going to go your way, Teva, but I'll start with you guys and just work through your slides. So in some form, like the broad word of residential, what exists inland right now in terms of restriction in residential areas, it's a little looser, but does not exist now in the coastal zone. And we're really in some form, according to this, moving to the same type of restrictions in the coastal zone. Would that be a sort of a fair statement? It's a little broader in the residential zones inland and a little tighter in the coastal zones, I realize, right? But what's being put in place in the coastal zone is similar to what's in the inland zone.
Correct.
Okay. I don't think people realize that, so just asking the simple questions. And so I know I had a slide on this, but I get a lot of emails on this too. So accessory dwelling units for people who went through the legal permitting process were acknowledged at the time that they got their permit of occupancy that they recognized that they could not have a short-term vacation rental in either one of the one they're living in, if they were using the ADU separately, or even if they moved into the ADU, they could not do that in the other part that's on their property. They acknowledge that as part of that process, correct?
Correct. That's an existing covenant.
And then, can you talk a little bit about how we get to the numbers of whatever the numbers are now for parking based on bedrooms? And how, and in particular, why 2 for up to, I think, up to 4 bedrooms, and then more after that for 5 or more? How do we pick those numbers and not something different? I'll just give you an example. Why, for say 2 bedrooms, would, I know one of the considerations is to loosen that up, and why would we loosen that up for everything, and why not still have a tier where for smaller bedroom count you lived with what's there on the ground right now, but for some amount of larger bedrooms, 3, 4, 5, that's the ones you said we definitely need parking for. So how do we get where we are?
Well, the two spaces per unit is already in your code for single-family homes, and we added one when there were going to be more bedrooms, just presuming there were going to be more people renting that unit. And a lot of the feedback that we've had from the public is the parking overflows, and so that was our effort.
And so if somebody in a residential setting, just pure residential, that did not meet that requirement on a house built in the 50s, but added a room on, did a project or something, would they not still be allowed to keep what's on the ground and be non-conforming?
That's up to your direction. Right now, it's written to
No,
be.
not for short-term vacation rentals. So
Oh.
just like, I'm trying to compare residential oranges to
Got
residential
it.
sort of use oranges. And, you know me, I'm going to go everywhere I can to kind of blend those together. And so if my house, I want to add on something, but I live in an older house and I only have a driveway that fits one car and I have to park in my driveway. Maybe I don't have a garage, maybe I don't even have off-street parking. But I make an improvement on my house, do I then have to find room for the current parking requirement, or do I get grandfathered in as legal nonconforming?
We'll have Brenda answer.
Good afternoon, committee member Jordan. It's different in the inland area than it is in the coastal zone. So inland, the parking requirement for single family is 2 spaces, but you do get grandfathered in, like you said, if you're non-conforming and you only have 1 space. And there's no trigger to require conforming parking, even if you do an addition. In the coastal zone, it's a little bit different. It's an older ordinance, and then you have a 50% limit where you have to provide conforming parking.
And so, just use coastal zone, because that's going to obviously be my focus today. So if you had not the required parking in the coastal zone, or you actually had no parking, you're just on an older street with no off-street parking, you would be precluded from doing a project there because you couldn't meet the parking? Or
A
isn't
short-term
there
rental
always a
project?
pathway?
No, I think it's resident, if you're going to add more than 50% of the floor area to
Right.
your home in the coastal zone, I think that's what you're
Okay, so
asking.
you just can't do your project.
You would have to
No.
provide the parking space to
Okay.
do your project or get a parking
But
modification.
it's an actual physical improvement on that site. It's not what's there already that triggers anything.
That's correct. It's
Okay.
addition of new floor area in the coastal zone, yes.
And then, how did we say 5+ bedrooms is a trigger point for more parking and 4 isn't? 4 is a pretty big house. That's why I'm asking that question. I mean, is that just a subjective thing we can talk about later today?
Yes, we
Okay.
looked at some other cities' ordinances for short-term rentals, and that seemed pretty consistent.
Okay. And the restrictions as they're hanging out in there now on tandem parking, currently just with a waiver, right, on the piece of paper, but I know we're going to talk about those. And if you go down in pretty much where 90% of the targeted licensed area is, I would hazard 90% of those parcels just have a little straight driveway and no turnaround. It is all back out parking. And so that requirement is waived automatically. There is no requirement waived automatically for a normal residential setting, correct? Just for a house. I can have a residence up to, somebody's gonna help me, 2 units, right? Does that sound right? That I can do back out parking or tandem parking without really going through a process. Does that sound right?
Yeah, the backing out and tandem are 2 separate things.
Okay, so let's work on back out.
Yeah.
So back out in a residential setting, not a short-term vacation rental setting as we're at, but in a residential setting, there's a trigger there somewhere, but it's not like, it's like for a 1 or 2 bedroom house, I think or up to, is it units?
It's units.
Okay.
And number of parking spaces.
Okay.
There's also
So
some
sorry.
safety concerns, like you can't back out a long ways. Like if you were 150 feet
Right.
back, that'd be too long
For
to back out.
single-family residence, you can back out without asking permission.
The transportation still reviews the parking configuration to ensure
Okay.
that it's safe.
And then tandem, what's the nexus of a tandem requirement to go get a waiver? Again, with my perception that 90% of the permit area that we're talking about in the coastal zone is in West Beach, and those are all pull-in. The only space that's there is one or two cars parking bumper to bumper. And so what's the nexus for no tandem parking in a residential use like that?
So currently tandem parking is not allowed for single family without a waiver,
Okay,
because they want to make sure, again, that the backing out and the tandem configuration is safe and that you're not turning around on the street, that
Okay.
kind of thing, yeah.
okay. And at what point will we talk about pricing for the licensing process? When would that happen? When is that appropriate?
We've been working on that quite a bit, and we'll have something ready when it comes to city council. We've
Okay.
actually figured out FTEs for community development. There's some time in the city attorney's office too, so that will be in front of the council, full council.
Okay. And there's a past, for those who think we've just been working on this just for a couple months, there's a past report at some time that had a bunch of dots on the coastal zone.
Oh.
Okay, yeah, so you're remembering that, right?
I am.
Okay, those numbers, I'm just going to make up numbers, but I think I'm pretty close. Those numbers indicated that there was something like 700 plus in the inland zone and 700 plus in the coastal zone. How did we get down to, like, pick on the coastal zone, how did we get down to just a few paying and a couple hundred out there that we know of now that aren't paying us when we had such a big number? And we had literally, if you blew that map down to a piece of paper size, it was just one big blob of dots so close together they weren't separated. So how did we get down to such a small number now?
It's a
Councilmember,
really good question. I'm
uh,
going to ask city attorney to
yeah.
respond.
I'll respond to that. So we have a software program that basically scrapes these, and they have them in there twice sometimes, because the more you put it in, like into Airbnb, the more likely hits you're going to get.
Okay.
So we went through them and realized we could whittle it down to probably about 600.
And then confirm for me on our relationship with the platforms. So in other places that actually have a real ordinance that handles short-term vacation rentals, we can require the platforms to show permit information with the city, and we can require them to collect our money upfront to us. And one of the things that's been preventing that up till now is the fact that we just don't even have a mechanism or an ordinance to show what the heck we're doing. And this ordinance would also give us both the ability to manage it that way, but it will also give us legal recourse against the platforms themselves if they didn't adhere to our local ordinance. Is that correct?
That's correct. And city attorney might want to expand on that, because we've heard at the team level why an ordinance is so important to corral that. So Ms. Ostringer, or Ariel.
Councilmember Jordan. Yes, so under SB 346, which was just enacted in 2025, it gives the cities the mechanism to require the listing platform to report the addresses of any homes that are listed on their sites, and then we can charge them a fine or penalty. Santa Monica's currently doing something similar. So yes, we could.
Okay, thanks. And last question for you guys. You had that whole slide there as a result of the Planning Commission conversation on zoning based and caps per zones in your thing, and the most recent there. There are munis in the state, in California, coastal communities with coastal zones that have successfully banned short-term vacation rentals in totality and made it through the Coastal Commission, right? I can answer that question.
I-
I'm right,
I
but I don't
couldn't
know what
list
they
you-
are off the top of my head. But, so you have looked at some other options. Did you also look for the option of banning them totally in the coastal zone or citywide? And the pathway that exists or doesn't exist there, was that a pathway 10 years ago? Is it a pathway 5 years ago? Is it a pathway now with the Coastal Commission? What that looks like?
I understand what you're asking. So we've had really good conversations with the Coastal Commission, and they have those ordinances that you might have read. I'm honestly unfamiliar with them. What we are hearing with resounding clarity from the Coastal Commission staff is you need to have something in your coastal zoning ordinance amendment for us to approve it as staff, to take it to the Coastal Commission, that distributes visitor serving uses via SDRs in your coastal zone. So we've been talking to them about the license area, about the, online license application, about the incorporation of home shares, and we're getting there. But they have never, ever said, gee, yeah, one option you have is just to disallow them everywhere. So if there's an ordinance in the city or county along the state in the coastal zone, I bet it might be an older one, but every one that's come in lately, like in the last 7 to 8 years that has had to do an amendment to it, we're seeing this distribution requirement from the Coastal Commission. And I also want to just take a second here to explain, the Coastal Commission is also struggling with a shift in what they have to do. Really, 10 to 15 years ago, the Coastal Commission did not like housing in the coastal zone. They would tell you that to their face. They said, we want visitor-serving uses, campgrounds, hotels, thank you very much. They've had to adjust their position too, because why? The housing elements. The housing elements are requiring all of us to be very proactive in providing more housing. So they have recognized that in our discussions with them, and that's why I think they're being as gentle as they can, but they cannot tell us if they would approve or not approve this package that's before you today. That's our next step.
Okay. All right, Tava, you're up. The way the ordinance is written now, I have a question about this 24-month look-back period of used as, you have to wait 24 months if you were using it as a normal rental before you could convert to a short-term vacation rental.
Correct.
Right? So let's say somebody does a renovation project for however they do it. Let's say they go through the major renovation, renoviction, if I can call it that, process, and their project takes 25 months. What precludes them then from taking 25 months and then converting to short-term vacation rentals and kind of dodging around that requirement because most of that time was used, if not all of that time, was used up in construction period?
Councilmember Jordan, so that's a really good question. I think that probably could be the loophole. We'd have to
Okay.
address it either
So-
through change to our.
I'll put that on your work list then. And then I know I've asked this question once or twice, and I'm just going to keep pummeling on it because I don't like the answer. But my concern is that, let's just say, make up a scenario, is that we move through this, we find something, it pretty much agrees with the ordinance, we agree on those areas, and we agree some long allowance time to transition, plus what's on the ground has a long time to actually permit up. And I'm concerned that it would be like the old Measure E, where then people see this coming that aren't paying TOT, aren't compliant with our current rules right now that they pay TOT. So they're one of these hundreds of units operating somewhere in what would be a legal zone in the coastal zone, a legal area, and they just run down and sign up and pay TOT and act like they've been in business for a while, and they're going to get all these allowances that we're giving to the other people who have a business, have had a business license, have been paying TOT. And so we just did this with, the council just did this with the rent freeze. They walked it back 2 or 3 months to when it was first being talked about. is it potentially legal for us to walk back any of those allowances that we may be granting to in-operation short-term vacation rentals in an approved area, walk that back to, say, January 1st, and say only those ones are getting the grandfathered in this, the grandfathered in that, and everybody else has to start over with the full change of use permit process? Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand the
Okay.
question. So, yes, I think we could, but we work with finance in our office, and so if someone were to come in and they were not paying their TOTs, and we have them on our list as someone that we know is operating, we would go back and collect those TOTs all the way back.
Okay. So that would be the stick of the carrot?
Yes.
Rather than just say, go away?
Yes.
Okay. There's some stuff in here on the relationship with property managers and owners. And there's actually a phrase in here somewhere where it says the property, I'll find it at some point today, that the property manager is responsible for this chapter. We can hunt for that phrase, but my question is, why would we have a phrase in there where a property manager is responsible for something when it's really the owner of the property that would have to be notified of a complaint or a enforcement action, and the property manager would not be responsible?
We would do both.
Okay, so I will find that for you and point it out.
Thank you.
And then does I look, but I can't tell, does we call it a permit or a license?
License.
Which one?
License.
License, okay. Does the license just assign to the person and is not transferable with the property that's in there somewhere where it sells and then you have a new person? We would be vetting that new person again to continue that license.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's
And what would
to the
happen?
individual.
And what would happen on death in the family and movement through a family trust or something like that? Would that still be true, or if it's Mike passing it to Taylor, does Taylor get anything like he was there as part of the deal already, or is it the same change in person and we would do it again?
It would be considered the same change in a person.
Okay. And, okay. And then, what is the purpose of saying that a person or entity can only own one legal permitted short-term vacation rental in the city?
Yeah, try it.
Chair Gutierrez and Commissioner Jordan, the purpose of only allowing one per entity or person was, I believe that could have been directed by City Council in the past, but also that's a very common requirement in a lot of the other short-term rental ordinances we reviewed. So we decided to put that forward as sort of the most, let's say, conservative option. It's up to you if you want to change that, but that's the path
Okay.
we took.
And that'd be probably the same answer for somebody who's part of an LLC or a limited partnership to also not double dipping, just the same conservative.
That's
Starting
correct.
point.
And also to avoid someone buying many, many properties and turning them into short-term rentals. You know, if we could limit it to one per person or entity or LLC, we retain our neighborhoods like we want to.
Okay. I would quibble whether people are that bad. I mean, you could just have individual people doing that same thing too, with the same impact too. So I just wondering why we're picking on people and entities. There's a lot of people I know, increasing number of people I know that put their single-family residence into an LLC for whatever reason too. So And we seem to be that's a bad radar sign, so it might not be. Okay,
Oh,
here's the, on page 7 of my Title 28, it's something number 3, C number 3. Somewhere in there, it says, "The property manager is responsible for ensuring compliance with this chapter." Somewhere there under number 3. But they're not signing the affidavit. So I'm looking at that affidavit paragraph where the people that are signing that affidavit are the actual owners of the property. But then the property manager is being told they're responsible for ensuring compliance with this chapter. It seems like, I mean, if you want to have a property manager, great, but it's still the owner who's responsible for compliance with the chapter, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then to apply, you have a whole list of things, and one of them is you have to have a business license. And my dumb question would be, why would I go buy a business license before you approve my application?
It's a very good question.
Okay, so we could play with that and get it, there's a condition after approval that you go get a business license and sign up for TOT, that kind of thing. Sign up to have a pathway for TOT.
Yes, that's a good catch.
Okay.
Through the chair, Councilman Jordan, staff talked about that, and it's a sequential thing. Also, we didn't want people to have to register to pay TOT until they knew they were going to get the license. So there's a little bit of a sequence, and we thought it through in terms of the Acela online licensing so that the business license is a fairly inexpensive investment in this. So I think we were looking for getting the business license as evidence of their application, get the application approved, and then go file for TOT.
Makes more sense. And then I want to talk about the whole appeal process. So you'll have to help me with what it is. Right now, it stays in-house, meaning down in Garden Street, right? So you apply, you get denied, the appeal is right back in-house, community development director, or probably that would be, or her designee, probably, right? So, like to make work for more people, but why would we not get that out of the building and say, not involve the planning commission until there's appeal, but make everything else happen in-house, and make the planning commission hear that appeal like they do other land use appeals?
Yeah.
The way we've set up the license, it's a ministerial sort of over-the-counter kind of license. You meet a set of criteria and you get an approval for the license. So there is we haven't written an appeal process in there at all. It's a decision of the director and it stays with the director. So it's kind of a yes or no, black and white. Do you meet this criteria? If you meet it, you'll get a license.
I'm sorry. I think I'm talking about suspensions and revocations.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
All right.
So I can read my notes on what my question is, but I'm not referencing it across the page to the other side. So I think so as a result of an enforcement action, all of the remedies to the party that's being enforced against are in-house. And I'm just wondering why the original determination can't be by the community development director or designee with appeal to planning commission.
The original approval is not appealable, but a revocation is heard by the planning commission.
Okay.
And our city attorney may be able to talk a little bit
I'm
more
going to have to
about
read more.
why
I'm going to have to read
revocation.
those paragraphs more again while everybody else is asking questions and figure out what my real question was. Thoughts on only a minimum stay of 1 night? Why would we not require a minimum stay of 2 nights? And here's my reasoning. I'll just tell you my talking point on that is if you have a problem with an overnight guest in a short-term vacation rental and they're only there for a night because that's all, we allowed that, by the time the problem is raised to the property manager or owner the next day and the city the next day, the person causing the problem is already gone. And the owner of the short-term vacation rental literally has no idea what really happened, cannot go make a site visit with, and find out what happened. And wouldn't one method be to benefit everybody from 2-night minimums financially, but also to remedy that of somebody just coming through for one night, trashing a place, trashing a hood, whatever, and bailing before anybody even has a chance to complain the next day on the moment they're checking out? Did we just say, if we're going to set a minimum, why would we set a minimum of one night? Because I guess we're not doing hourly, but that seems kind of silly.
Not
But
that.
it seems
Not
kind of
that.
silly, but I don't know. I'm kind of naive. But is that just a number and we can make a case later in comments for 2 nights?
Absolutely.
Okay. Have I asked too many questions yet? No? Okay. Yeah. You know, everything else just really gets down in the weeds, and I think I'll have another meeting to play with this probably, so why don't I just move on? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. And I think your Planning Commission background, Councilmember Jordan, is really coming out and is really helpful for all of us. And so I have one main question and then just maybe 2 or 3 smaller questions because we have so much public comment and I'm sure we'll have our time for questions more. So on slide 14 and then also slide 15. Should I go back to it? So slide 14, which is the map.
Let me get there.
Okay.
I honestly, home share? The license one.
I have a question about each one, but we
Okay.
can start with this one. So this is the proposed inland short-term rental license area. What is it currently,
Zoning-wise or?
zoning-wise?
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a mix of commercial and office uses. Yeah, commercial and office uses, really.
So how does this compare with where they are currently allowed? Is this the exact same footprint, or is this an expanded footprint, or?
Well, right now, they're not allowed in the inland area at all.
Unless
you
they're
do
in
this
a-
conversion of use permit, this awkward permit thing that we have, or do a hotel conversion. So we have a limited number of those, but there is no.
But they're
zone
allowed
that
in the
was
commercial zone, right?
Not a short-term rental per se. Hotels are allowed in a commercial zone.
Okay, so I think it would be a useful map to show, because they do, we have some that are permitted and some that are allowed, and those can only be allowed in certain zones.
Yes.
So
to
where
answer-
are those zones?
The map would align except for the RMH zone.
Okay, so for all of us, which would
is-
that be?
The RMH zone is a multi-unit
But
and
where on
hotel
this
zone.
map would it be?
I don't think it's highlighted on this map.
Okay,
But-
so I
yeah.
think as a comment, it would be really useful to see, since this is the proposed, we're allowed to have that overlaid with where conversions, or however the process currently for how they're permitted, where those align or don't align. And maybe I could just say, so this is an expansion of the zones where they're currently could be converted?
It's a reduction.
It's a reduction?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So this map is the commercial zones. It doesn't include the multifamily RMH zone for our proposed short-term rental area.
If it doesn't show that zone, and we added that zone on here, it would be more space.
Yes.
So this
So we've reduced the areas where short-term rentals will be allowed in the
Okay.
inland area.
So would they no longer be allowed in that RMH
Correct.
zone? Oh,
Right.
okay, thank you. That's a point I didn't quite get before. And then on slide 15, this is proposed coastal home share area, but I think in the ordinance, if I'm understanding it, it says home shares are allowed in all zones that allow residential uses. So wouldn't this whole map be green?
Committee members, Sneddon, there's portions on that map that are zoned parks and recreation, or what's that other zone that doesn't allow residential? Industrial.
But very much of this map, more, like, this is just emphasizing the coastal
Oh,
home
it's
share.
only in the coastal zone that
Right.
home shares would be allowed in the residential zone districts, not inland.
Okay.
So it's only showing,
Because in Title 28, where allowed, A, it says home shares are allowed in all zones that allow residential uses.
that's what you're seeing that's what's green on the map right now.
Because Title 28 is only the coastal zone,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
that.
Okay. So we're not proposing home shares in any other zones but the coastal zone?
That's not correct. We're allowing home shares inland in the same places you can have short-term rentals.
Okay, so again, I think it would be helpful, even though I realize you're emphasizing just one ordinance and the other, but for me, I don't have like a clear picture on, for the whole city, what is the whole area that we're talking about where short-term rentals or home shares?
So what you see on these two maps are all the areas where either short-term rentals or home shares would be allowed. So again, in inland area,
Okay. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. So on this map,
yes,
where it's red,
is home
it
shares
could
or
also be home
STRs,
shares.
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then on the next map,
Yes. That's where home shares are allowed. I guess there's another map that might help you,
Where they
would show you in the
all over-
coastal zone where
yes.
STRs
yes,
and
because
home shares.
I can
Yeah.
kind of in my mind's eye overlay these,
Yeah,
but there's.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And it's yeah, just
It's a little confusing, yeah.
just to me. I don't know if it is to anyone else. And I guess just one question, we'll get to all the little details, but is this the most restrictive we could be with short-term rentals given current law? Not guessing what Coastal Commission might say, but if we were to propose and send it on to Coastal Commission, and would what we be sending be the most restrictive that it could be?
No, you
Okay.
can be as restrictive as you want.
We could ban them entirely.
You could try, yeah.
We could try, yeah, okay. Okay, that answers my question for now. Thank you.
Thank you. So do you all have like a potential number of homes that would be affected by this? Do you all have that number?
We do. Hold on a second. Rosie has been the master mathematician on this.
We have some numbers, but I want to know what you mean by affected by this.
Like how many homes would be eligible?
Oh, how many eligible? Let's see, there's a lot of numbers. So we have if inland, let's just say inland, every site that could become a STR or home share, there are 954 sites and 3,593 units. And that's because there's sites with condos and multi-units. So there's more sites than units. And then in the coastal zone, there's potential within the license area we've been talking about. There's a potential for about, let's just say 1,200 units. When you add the home share area in the residential zone, that goes up to about 4,100 units. So that's if everybody did one. That's the max.
Gotcha. Okay. Can you go back and I just got hung up on that whole 23 units paying TOT inland may
Yeah,
qualify.
I can address that. Yesterday, we made some changes to the slides, but unfortunately, the one you saw up here didn't show that. So we have been asked how many short-term rentals have been permitted with a change in use process that we've been talking about. So these are previously residential units that applied to become a short-term rental and got their planning permit and a building permit. So we know the numbers changed a little bit because we've done some more research and some projects actually have been approved. So anyway, the number that I believe was in your staff report was 23. It might have been 24. It changed. There was one we missed. So there's about 23, 24 that have gone through the process.
Okay,
They're all inland.
gotcha. All right. So a person would have to obtain a business license to operate an STR, is that correct?
Yes.
So is it true that, so for example, in my district, there are quite a few businesses right next to residential homes. Those people that live in the residential homes next to the businesses say that they're allowed to convert their home into a business because it neighbors a business. Is that correct?
No,
That's not correct?
not necessarily.
Okay.
It depends on your zone district, right? So if you happen to live in a street that has a commercial zone, that is possible, but are you talking about just short-term rental conversion or conversion to, an
I'm
architect's
just-
office or?
The concept makes me wonder that if there's a short-term rental with a business license, then the property owner next door can say, well, now my house is a mechanic shop. Something like that.
I want to take a minute here and explain the confusion that's widespread in the community. The city accepted transit occupancy tax 16 years ago from people that were doing this short-term rental, which is a new model. It was kind of a weird thing that cropped up on our landscape. So people started doing this, and they got a business tax license, tax certificate for their business. And the city finance department didn't look at whether it was a zoning issue or not. It never really became an issue until we started hearing about complaints. So now there's a widespread presumption that as long as you're paying your business tax certificate and you're paying your TOT, that you're, quote, legal. But that's not true because we don't have the permit path, right? What we have is that hotel conversion process for the 23 or 24, because when they came in to get the permit, we, had them go through transportation and they couldn't back out and, X, Y, Z. So it's just a widespread misunderstanding by the public. You'll probably hear about it today. I mean, we've heard at all the hearings. So your example of having someone say, well, I've got a short-term rental next door so I can do an auto mechanic shop in my house, that's not really a carryover of any zoning allowance. Unless he's zoned, C2 or MC, or I'd have to look up the zone districts that allow a mechanic shop to be located
But
on your site.
let's say, all right, so let's say it's not a mechanic shop. Let's say it's something else like, I don't know, a convenience store or something.
Well,
Like,
the zoning ordinance
yeah,
has.
furniture, upholstery, something like that.
If I may, Mr. Chair, wherever the parcel is, wherever that site property is, we first look at the zone to determine, each zone identifies in our municipal code what are the allowed uses. So we look at that. So single-family residential, the R1 zone, generally you can have a single-family residence, you might be able to have, but it's very restricted. We don't generally allow a lot of commercial. The corridors along State Street or St. Andres, that that has more, those zones allow some commercial activity, but not all commercial activity. So you won't see a full mechanic shop happening on those streets because it is still more a residential neighborhood and context. And so the way that our zoning map is constructed and the way that the zones were created is to try to honor those locations. And that's why we don't have a lot of industrial stuff happening in a residential neighborhood. So really, when people start with any question, they always have to ask, what is my property? What am I allowed to do? And that's the work that we do at the planning counter every single day to kind of help inform people what is their path. Are they allowed to do this by right? Or is there a permitting path forward for them? Or is it, the reality of many questions that come up, just because it looks like, oh, this could be a great short-term rental, the zone doesn't allow it, and therefore they do not have a permitting path. I hope that answers your question.
Sure, yeah, thank you. So if we go back to slide 14.
Did you want me to go to different? Okay.
Yeah.
These are numbered. I don't know. Oh, thank you.
So those little island spots there, why are those considered appropriate?
In the purple hatch,
Right. No, sorry, in the
The red,
proposed
the
inland
inland.
short-term rental.
those are sort of along commercially zoned areas. So you've got Upper Delavina and Upper State Street all the way to Five Points. It spreads out on top. You've got the small San Andres, Mitchell Terrena thing over to the west of the freeway. You've got Milpas Corridor, and then you've got, like I said, on the Mesa, you've got that little area where Lazy Acres is. Is that in Bonds? Is that your question?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering why those specific areas were deemed appropriate. But you answered it by saying that they're deemed commercial zones.
Correct.
So there's already an established statement of businesses operating in that location.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, that's all the questions I had. So I'm going to open it up to, I'm sorry, Councilmember Jordan.
Just one more, thanks. I just wanted to piggyback on the chair's question on, I saw some people with bad body posture when he said in the proposed license area in the coastal zone, there could be 1,000 new short-term vacation rentals. What would be allowed right now in the coastal zone today? I'll help you answer that. It's every single-family residential parcel, right? Would be allowed in the situation we're in today, right?
Well, it's not being enforced on.
Well, but it's not being allowed. That's my favorite phrase, by the way. You've heard that one before, right? Right?
Okay.
So,
Correct.
But today,
Yeah.
I can go put a short-term vacation rental down in the coastal zone, and I can come sign up to pay TOT, and I'm done. And that would apply at a minimum to every single-family residential parcel in the coastal zone. So I guess my point is, I'm saying when I saw people like 1,000, there's probably 10,000 right now. Allowable is not the right word. The right phrase would be not allowed that could happen in the coastal zone. So I just wanted to put that in perspective, because we're not going to somewhere that's a whole bunch. We're reducing it by a significant amount.
Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up there, too. I was just looking through, too. So in Los Angeles, they have only, if it's the host's primary residence, and so that's what we're doing, too. But it occurs to me also they prohibit them in rent-controlled units, and since we don't have that, we don't know where we are exactly on that. Have we contemplated with this ordinance could we provisionally, I mean, I'm just thinking about the timing of it, because I think that's pretty important. If housing is for housing, and if someone has a controlled unit and then they're renting it out for a short-term vacation rental, like, wow, that would be not in the spirit. So would we handle that later when we, and I don't want to talk too much about something that's a future agenda, but how do we manage that piece of it?
Chair Sneddon, I think what we would have to do is we'd just come back and make a simple amendment to the Title 30 ordinance would be simple. The Title 28 would be a little bit more challenging, but it's going to take a while for Title 28 for this one to get through the process. If you recall, when I think we did ADUs, it took like a year and a half. So it takes a while.
So with the Coastal Commission, it might take a while. once it-
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have about an hour and 20 minutes until the council meeting starts, and we have over 30 or almost 40 commenters so far. So I limited the time to 2 minutes per speaker. So if you do the math, we're most likely going to run out of time. So I'm going to ask the public, if you feel like your comments have already been shared, be considerate of other people's who may have comments that haven't been shared yet, because we're going to run out of time. So with that being said, let's have a first commenter.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. Our first commenter will be Jack Eisenhower, followed by Gwen Brown.
Thank you. My wife and I live on the Mesa in a home we bought in 1974, and we are bothered by the growing number of unlicensed STRs in our neighborhood. Quite simply, we support the city's proposed ordinance as written with no changes or amendments. I don't agree with everything in the ordinance. I wish it was more restrictive on short-term rentals, but I understand the need to compromise. The proposed ordinance does exactly what good policy should do. It protects neighborhoods, preserves housing, and creates a workable framework for responsible home sharing. It also gives the Coastal Commission exactly what it needs: a legitimate, non-hotel option for coastal lodging that doesn't come at the expense of residential neighborhoods. Now, some short-term rentals are run by conscientious people who follow the rules and just want a return on their investment. But let's face it, there are also well-organized commercial interests that are in it for the money and do not care about the needs of the neighborhood. Either way, these are unlicensed businesses operating in residential neighborhoods. That is not what I signed up for when I moved to the Mesa. I've heard warnings that, what if we get this wrong? Home prices will fall, TOT will plummet, tourists won't visit. The question isn't if we get it wrong. The right question, what if we get it right? What if this ordinance is just the thing that saves neighborhoods, saves housing, and avoids the fate of other tourist destinations that have lost their character? After 11 years of delay, the council owes it to residents to pass the ordinance today, not send it back for another round of rewrites that serve powerful real estate interests, not neighborhoods. Simply put, my fellow Mesa neighbors and I prefer housing over lodging, neighbors over tourists, tranquility over disturbances, and people over profits. That's the Santa Barbara that the rest of us want. Thank you.
Gwen Brown, followed by Kathy Janega Dykes.
Honestly, what he said. Safety and quality of life.
Kathy Janega Dykes, followed by Jed Hendrickson.
Mr. Chair, members of the Ordinance Committee, I'm Kathy Chenega-Dykes. I'm President and CEO of Visit Santa Barbara. I just want to begin with a concern regarding the changes to the short-term rental ordinance. There have been a lot of assumptions made, not necessarily at this meeting, but certainly at previous meetings, and I don't understand why a whole comprehensive study has not been done just to understand the impacts of this decision. And I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we maintain the status quo. At Visit Santa Barbara, our residents are our customers as well, and they shouldn't have to deal with STR operators who aren't following the rules. This is an issue that needs to be addressed. However, my concern is that we're moving towards significant policy changes based on assumptions that could affect the city's general fund. Again, at previous meetings, there have assumptions been made that as short-term rental visitors will simply convert to hotel guests. I can tell you from experience that will not happen. Short-term rentals serve a different type of travelers, particularly families or groups that need space. Second, there's an assumption that STRs will result in long-term housing. How do we know that? This outcome is far from guaranteed and really depends on broader economic conditions. So before making decisions that could impact revenue, visitation, and housing, we should take the time to study these dynamics, to understand the potential loss of revenues, the potential loss of visitors, and the actual housing outcomes. At the same time, there is a clear path forward, and this is a regulation issue. The focus should be on creating a strong, enforceable framework that includes platform accountability, good neighbor requirements, meaningful enforcement, and the ability to revoke permits when operators do not comply.
Jed Hendrickson, followed by Becky Cracky.
Yes, my name is Jed Hendrickson. I'm a board member of the Santa Barbara Cemetery Association, and I'm here representing the cemetery today in voicing our support for the ordinance changes before you. Why is the cemetery interested in these ordinances? We don't have any short-term rentals. But the cemetery is a resting place of loved ones for many of the Santa Barbara community, and as such, we have an obligation to provide a beautiful and well-maintained resting place in perpetuity. At some point in the future, the cemetery will no longer have graves to sell, to provide income, and future maintenance will rely on the funds that have been set aside for perpetual care. The cemetery owns property adjacent to the cemetery, which is not dedicated to cemetery use. There is a proposed residential project for that property called One Hot Springs Road. This project will bring housing to the community and provide the cemetery with income to help in perpetual care. For this reason, the cemetery is in favor of the proposed ordinance change and requests the inclusion of One Hot Springs Road in the STR overlay map. Thank you.
Becky Cracky, followed by Kelly Ari, who's been given time by Michael Mitchner.
Good afternoon, council members and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here today to address the proposed short-term rental regulations and specifically the importance of grandfathering existing operators who have long history of compliance. For years, many STR owners have operated responsibly, paying transient occupancy taxes, following local regulations, maintaining their properties, and contributing meaningfully to the local economy. These are not bad actors. They are engaged members of the community who have played by the rules as they were written. It's also important to acknowledge how we got here. In 2021, following the City of Santa Barbara versus Theo Cracky's decision, then City Attorney Ariel Kalan indicated somewhat quietly in a newspaper article that the city would begin accepting TOT and T-bid payments from STR owners through the pathway of a business license. Property owners tried to do the right thing. They stepped forward, attempted to register, and brought in the required paperwork. But in many cases, they were initially turned away at the counter or met with resistance. I know this firsthand. Our company received those calls. We would provide owners with a copy of the order, guide them through the process, and often only after persistence, their business license would finally be accepted. It took real effort and patience to comply in an environment that was not always clear and accessible. Despite those obstacles, many owners stayed the course. They paid their taxes, they followed the rules, they acted in good faith. Grandfathering these operators is not about avoiding regulation, it's about fairness. It recognizes those who made the effort to comply, even when the path was unclear. It protects individuals who relied on the city's direction and contributed consistently to our local economy. Now, as we finally move forward with formal regulation, I respectfully urge you to include clear grandfathering provisions, particularly for properties that are outside your licensed area but within the coastal zone. For those who have historically paid TOT and followed the rules, they have earned that consideration. Thank you.
Kelly Ari, followed by Lucille Boss. Kelly Ari's been given time from Michael Mitchner. You'll have 3 minutes.
I won't need it, I don't think, I hope not.
Okay, are you speaking or is
I am,
Kelly?
I'm Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Kelly Airy, and I'm the owner of Pacific Time Management LLC, which operates a licensed short-term rental at 112 West Coda. It's one of the few, now 24 units, I guess is the number, that's been legally licensed, permitted, TOT paying through a very arduous system, and that's the reason why there's only 25 of us. The property's been a part of the community since 1906, and I'm here today because I wanted to flag a few things I've noticed in the proposed ordinance that I believe are either legally problematic or disproportionate, and I have consequences that the city did not intend. I did submit a written letter previously and gave one to the clerk to see if we can put it into the record. The first is the license transferability. Under the current draft, the license cannot be transferred to a family member, not to a buyer or a seller of the property. My plan is to pass the business on to my daughter when I retire, and that would terminate that license under H4C. But I also want to be clear, if I choose to sell my property, that the property should be able to transfer to an operator of the business that the city is already vetted and licensed. And under the draft, the compliant permitted store STR goes dark during the escrow days, and that destroys the value that the city's helped me create. Secondly, the grandfathering. The only existing protection is for exemption under S1, which is a protection of pre-existing buildings from building inspectors' requirements under 01. My property was built in 1906. And it has was operated for years. It's that 180-day compliance window may not be sufficient time to remediate a 120-year-old structure with any new requirements that are required. So I ask that we look for a grace period under the grandfather status. Third is it says that the city named additional insured. So under subsection L, it requires STR operators to name the city as an additional insured on their liability policy. And to my knowledge, the city does not require restaurants, retail stores, private businesses. That requirement only usually applies to public property uses like sidewalks, dining, or harbor permits. Extending this to the STR property has no precedent in Santa Barbara and would raise the operator cost significantly. And fourth is the indemnification clause. Subsequent to M, STR operators who defend and identify the city even for claims arising from the city's own permitting process. There's no carve out for city negligence. To conclude, I guess that's it. I left my comments. Thanks.
Lucille Boss, followed by Dustin Hoyseth.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Lucille Boss. I'm a homeowner on the Mesa in Santa Barbara and currently serve as chair of the city's Planning Commission. The Planning Commission hesitated to send this forward to the ordinance for your consideration because of the analysis and revisions needed. However, we value the time and effort of staff and didn't want to hinder the process toward implementing the ordinance. Our intent was for staff to address the concerns and revise the ordinance. Today, you're seeing the same ordinance with significant comments and analysis from staff. However, I'll reiterate some of the critical feedback we provide that has not been addressed comprehensively in the materials before you today. First, considering waivers specifically for parking. Relying on existing regulations makes STRs and home shares a non-starter in some developments where they're proposed to be allowed, which is misleading and confusing. Including enforcement details to specifically address concerns about home shares or STRs, and including assurances from platform companies. Enforcement details, including funding for staff, are still absent, so I'd ask you to reconsider those. And finally, reconsider the use of zoning for inland and coastal STR restrictions and analyze cap-based, density-based, and lottery-based systems as alternatives. This was a request initially made by the Planning Commission during a December meeting when asked to consider the eligibility requirements and the process. I did a cursory review of STR ordinances approved by the Coastal Commission and found that those with caps and lottery systems are being passed. According to today's report, staff's review of of Coastal Commission actions on short-term rental ordinances since 2020 that were approved indicates the majority included some sort of cap system. I'm concerned this request was not addressed following the December meeting nor following the March Planning Commission meeting. And the staff report notes that developing a cap or lottery system appropriate to Santa Barbara could take several months of research and outreach. So I'll ask you to consider marinating on the process a bit and get it right before going to Council and Coastal Commission. Thank you.
Dustin Hoyseth, followed by Theo Cracky.
Hello, Chair Gutierrez and council members. My name is Dustin Hoyseth. I'm the Director of Economic Development with the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce. I have changed my comments for brevity. The Chamber opposes the ordinance as drafted. We do not oppose regulating short-term rentals. We just ask for a more balanced approach that also measures the impacts to our economy, local businesses, and the fiscal impacts to the city. As has already been said, a loss of short-term rental stock will not necessarily transfer to more hotel stays. As proposed, this ordinance will by design eliminate a significant portion of existing short-term rental stock. This will have a significant impact on TOT revenue and would mean a loss of tens of millions of visitor spending at local businesses. That number is based on previous visitor economic studies. While we do not deny that this will have some impact on our local housing stock, we have not seen enough data to showcase that the impact will be significant enough to outweigh these previously stated negative impacts. The Chamber asks that the Ordinance Committee refer this to Finance Committee for further fiscal impact review, ask staff to address the Planning Commission's laundry list of concerns, their words, not mine, and regardless of how the impacts to timelines, and as well as explore guardrails like caps, tiered permitting, and enforcement mechanisms like in cities like San Diego and Palm Springs. Thank you for your time.
Theo Cracky, followed by Thomas Woodrow.
I started by saying good morning, but I'll have to say good afternoon now. My name is Theo Cracky. I'm a 45-year resident of Santa Barbara. I wasn't planning on speaking this, but I just want to reiterate when I spoke at the Planning Commission meeting, I really wanted to see proof that short-term rentals are negatively affecting the supply of long-term housing. No one has yet to prove that to us, and it's a very big concern because this whole premise is that you're doing long-term housing. The other little thing I wanted to add is that no one here that's opposed to this or that is in favor of this ordinance is talking about it in terms of long-term affordable housing. They're talking about it in terms of neighborhood nuisance requirements, which can be controlled, like I answered to the Planning Commissioner, with professional management and rigorous standards of that behavior. Now, hopefully I'll have enough time to talk about what I really want to talk about, which was I'm very concerned that the estimated losses of TOT and T-bid revenues outlined in the Budget and Financial Impact section of the Council Agenda Report. There are several issues with this ordinance as it relates to lost revenues. First, I do not believe the projected $2.0 to $2.4 million reduction in TOT revenue is accurate. And as a result, I believe the true impact on our local services is being understated. To better understand this, I contacted 4 of the leading short-term rental management companies operating here in Santa Barbara. Collectively, it's estimated that they remitted approximately $1.5 million in TOT in 2025 alone. These companies represent about 35% of the total short-term rental market, And based on that proportion, the actual potential loss of TOT revenue could be closer to $4 million plus annually, significantly higher than the estimate provided. Secondly, Santa Barbara is facing a $5.9 million budget gap this year and a projected $14.6 million deficit for the fiscal year of 2027. We simply cannot afford to lose out on millions of dollars of tourism taxes that are generated from short-term rental guests. Third, if this ordinance is approved in its current format, then what services will be cut to make up the resulting budget shortfall? Will fire and police response capabilities be reduced to staffing
It's time,
constraints?
Mr. Cracky.
Yeah,
Thank
I'll
you.
be done. Anyway, you got my point, I think.
Yes, thank you. And next speaker, please.
Thomas Woodrow, followed by Lisa Bowers.
Greetings. Tom Woodrow. I am Executive Director of the Santa Barbara County Taxpayers Association. We oppose the ordinance as drafted. It's irresponsible, minus fiscal impact study, at least an explanation from the Budget Committee and staff here at the city, along with the Planning Commission's laundry list of concerns. You might as well change that website to kicked $5 million out the door.com. The city is now projecting a budget deficit. Your city administrator, Kelly McAdoo, called the general fund budget, quote, precariously out of balance, end quote. Balance equals slashing the capital paving budget for the next 2 years by 50% and putting less money into reserves. That sounds potentially irresponsible. What other city services might be sacrificed if we get this really wrong? The article mentions street paving in Newshawk and staffing, but what about public safety? What about fire? What about police? Has this gone to the Budget Committee? How would the city even begin to raise the issue without knowing the fiscal impact or the enforcement burden? Just listening to staff talk about the enforcement complications, it sounds difficult and complex. What about funding for those staff? SBCTA strongly advocates the best practices governance of having this ordinance go to your Budget Committee first before it goes to final council action. That sequence helps ensure the fiscal impact, implementation costs, enforcement burden, and revenue implications are evaluated before policy is locked in. I know you as council members care about the city, you care about the budget, you care about making good decisions. I encourage you to do it the right way.
Thank you, Mr. Woodrow. Next speaker.
Lisa Bowers, followed by Tiffany Holler. She'll be given time from Kurt Holler. Lisa Bowers.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa, and I was born and raised here in Santa Barbara. I've worked with Holler Coastal Homes for the past 8 years in various roles and now as property inspector. I work closely every day with numerous housekeeping teams and local workers who help keep these homes running. I'm here because I see firsthand the real impact that this decision will have, not in theory, but in people's daily lives. The housekeeping team consists of 14 local workers. These are people from this community, people who depend on this work to support themselves and their families. And while many of them are paid hourly, that's not the full picture. They also rely on tips from guests. They rely on the extra support that comes from this kind of work. Even something as simple as refrigerator and cabinet full of unopened food left behind by guests makes a difference. It helps stretch their budgets. It helps their families. Groceries are so expensive right now. These are real everyday realities that don't always get talked about, but they matter. If this policy moves forward the way it's being proposed, that work doesn't shrink, it disappears. And with it, so does extra sources of support that so many workers rely on. I also see how guests interact with our community. When people stay in these homes, they don't just come and go, they spend their time here, sometimes for a few weeks, which is not possible at a hotel. They go to local restaurants, coffee shops, grocery stores, and small businesses, and not just ones at hotels. They spend their money in the city, not just on accommodations. That supports jobs, that supports local families, that supports this community.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers. Next speaker.
Tiffany Holler, she's been given time by Kurt Holler, and then followed by Steve Winger. Tiffany, you'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Tiffany Haller. I was driving here and I thought it might be good just to tell you again who I am. I am a Mesa resident. We've owned our home for 21 years. And the name of our company is Haller Coastal Homes. And there's a reason it's called coastal, because we represent owners in the coastal zone. We're here to protect these neighborhoods. Any of these people I've talked to, I am here to say that we would not tolerate anyone destroying a neighborhood or doing anything. They need to go. With that said, this really isn't a question about whether you agree with vacation rentals or not. This is a deeper issue about the policies you guys are making, and you're just ramming them through and without careful consideration, no statistics, nothing. And I'm tired of watching the city council keep going down this getting this so wrong for over a decade. And here we are pushing it through again. We're going to push it to city council after the planning commission already said we can't do that. So basically you guys are failing to listen. Listen to us. The decision's already made. You guys already decided this before we even came here. That's undemocratic. That is not how we should all be acting right now. But really, we need to get down to access. This is all about access, okay? Let's just use a scenario, a family with 3 children. They cannot stay in one hotel room. And I did a survey, it's $575 is the cheapest room in July. Okay, that's before parking fees, resort taxes, resort fees. That same family would have to rent 2 rooms, and that's $1,150 a night. They're not coming to Santa Barbara if there is not a $400 a night, no parking fee, vacation rental, okay? So what this is doing, it's actually restricting the access, and it's cutting off a lifeline to our local businesses, something that's not being considered. It's unintended consequences. So this eviction of vacation rentals that you're calling, or that we're calling it, it doesn't impact the wealthy. They're still going to come and stay at the Rosewood, stay at, the hotels downtown. You're evicting the people that can't afford to come to the coast and pay these hotel prices. So I just want to tell you also, in closing, I attended a Coastal Commission hearing just about 3 weeks ago, and Commissioner Preciado specifically stated that he's interested in understanding how we as a system in the coast are looking at these micro changes and how we're basically Xing them out. They are not in favor of any ban, and they are focused on affordable accommodations in the coast. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Heller. And our next speaker.
Steve Winger, followed by Steve Ells.
Hello. First of all, I want to let you know that I've been a resident and a homeowner on the Mesa for more than 50 years. And it really upsets me when some of the real estate firms have sent out letters to us telling us that our property values will be decreased if we do not allow short-term rentals. I believe that everyone should stay in their home when it's a home share. I don't believe that short-term rentals are the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shalps. Next speaker.
Steve Ells, followed by Paul Stern. Steve Ells? Okay, we'll go to the next speaker is Paul Stern.
Hello. My name is Paul Stern, and I live on the Mesa, and I run a home share on the Mesa, an Airbnb home share. The proposed ordinance is flawed, and I cannot support it, and I hope you will not support it. It is going to wreck what I call event tourism. event tourism for the low and middle class families of Santa Barbara. It is no longer affordable to get married or to have an anniversary or a bar mitzvah or some kind of anniversary party in Santa Barbara unless you are rich. The current room rates from corporate and out-of-state hotels are simply too high. You can't afford it unless you're rich. What I would support is the following. I think home shares should be legal and taxed throughout the city, but they should be limited to one resident or ADU per patron. I think that entire resident SDRs should be permitted throughout the city, but in order to support lower and middle class tourism, but they should be limited and they should be granted by annual lottery. They should be limited to 1 in 20 structures. They should be limited to 1 patron, and they should be limited to 1 house within 5 houses. There have to be 4 houses to the left, to the right, and across the street on either sides. That's the kind of ordinance that would support what I call cottage capitalism. And cottage capitalism is what most of the people in this community want. They don't want corporate capitalism, out-of-state capitalism, where all the profits and the money go to Texas and Florida and New York City. Okay? And finally, I think the Coastal Commission would support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Zender, followed by Brandy Zender.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm here today as a father and a homeowner who's increasingly concerned about the risks short-term rentals are introducing into our neighborhood, particularly when it comes to fire danger. My concern is also there for the home share model. We live in the Yankee Farm neighborhood, which is a designated high fire hazard zone. In this environment, risk management isn't optional, it's critical. Every resident is expected to follow strict guidelines: no open flames, vegetation management, and readiness to evacuate. Short-term renters don't operate under that same mindset. They're here for the weekend. They don't know the rules, and in many cases, they don't take them seriously. We've personally seen behavior that increases fire risk, late-night gatherings, careless activity outdoors, and a general lack of awareness about how dangerous this environment actually is. At the same time, when issues are reported, there's a clear breakdown in enforcement. Complaints get passed down between departments, and nothing materially changes. That gap in accountability is exactly what allows these risks to persist. This is not just a quality of life issue, it's a public safety issue. My ask is straightforward. First, prohibit short-term rentals and home shares in high-fired hazard zones. These areas are fundamentally incompatible with transient occupancy. Second, strengthen enforcement of existing SDR regulations as you're proposing now. Without enforcement, the rules don't matter. We all understand the value of tourism, but it cannot come at the expense of resident safety, especially in areas where the consequences of a mistake are catastrophic. Thank you for your time.
Brandy Zender, followed by Alex Sheshanoff.
My husband stole my thunder, so my name is Brandy Zender. I live in the Yankee Farm neighborhood. Thank you for the work you guys have put into this. I live next to multiple short-term rentals. They're far from affordable. They're up to $2,400 a night. They pack in about 15, sometimes more people. But what I want to talk about is a critical gap that I see is missing in the ordinance. The Yankee Farm area is in the high coastal fire zone, as my husband mentioned. This has been recognized by both the city and the county. This isn't random. This is due to the wind patterns and the typography that can fuel these wildfires. We have limited evacuation routes, literally one road in, one road out. During your June 24th city council meeting, you guys had a short-term rental framework presented to you that literally wrote prohibit and high fire. That reflected a known risk then. Nothing's changed. All we have to do is look at Palisades and Malibu and realize this is a real risk. So the home structure you've outlined is well thought through. However, in my experience, I've seen way too many times that when properties comply on paper, operators find ways around these ordinances or they bluntly ignore it in lieu of profit. I suspect some of these operators will still continue to do as they please, and this type of behavior in high fire zones carries a great risk. So if the home share model has to be considered, I ask that you please clearly define the high fire hazard zone section in the ordinance. That's where home shares in those areas will be flagged so that they can allow for better enforcement and oversight. Require these home shares to conduct additional fire safety measures such as defensible space, low ignition risk, fire-safe landscaping. And if the 6-month compliance period is allowed, which I think is extremely generous, that those homes have to meet those fire safety measures in that meantime. But I do appreciate what you guys are doing and trying to make this fair for us residents. Thank you.
Alex Sheshanov, followed by Georgia Strickland.
Thank you, Council. My wife and I and our 2 teenage boys live on the Mesa. To be able to afford our outrageous mortgage and our property taxes, we rent it out for part of the summer when we visit my wife's family. We are fully permitted, and we pay our taxes and have since we started 5 years ago. We only have 5-star reviews and have never had a noise complaint. We have a circular driveway, so there's no backing up. We have a decibel monitor that sends us alert in case there's a noise issue. If you were to pass this de facto ban on short-term rentals, we will be forced to sell. 3 guests have offered to buy our house so far, 1 from Orange County, 1 from Colorado, and another from Texas, all of whom would use our house as a second home. So instead of being occupied by a local family, our Mesa home, our primary residence, and the only house we own, will become a second home that sits vacant almost year-round, just like the house across the street from us and the house 2 houses down. Long-term rental inventory will not go up. Santa Barbara will not become more affordable. Only instead of having a local family and visitors support local businesses, the neighborhood will have 1 more house that sits empty. Yet we're also sensitive to preserving the neighborhood character. Many other cities have faced the same economic and political issue that the 3 of you do today, and have arrived at the same compromise solution. Namely, as this does, to allow short-term rentals only of people's primary residence to avoid companies from buying up dozens of these things, and to cap the total number of days a year a home can be rented. This is did a list of cities that do this already, who have already arrived at this conclusion. San Francisco caps it at 90 days, so does Berkeley, Pasadena, Sacramento, Pacifica, Santa Clara, San Diego. Los Angeles caps at 120 days, San Jose 180 days. As a next step, I'd urge you to direct city staff to research ordinances of some of these cities that have a total cap on daily rentals per year to see which could serve as a model. Thank you.
Georgia Strickland, followed by Ken Gran.
Good afternoon. I've lived on the Mesa since 1982 and have had no opinions regarding short-term rentals until 1, 2, and now 3 homes on my dead-end street of 13 homes have turned into vacation rentals. One of these short-term rentals charges $1,900 per night, hardly affordable. I'm in the process of building an ADU on my property so my daughter, her husband, and child, born and raised in Santa Barbara, will have a home to own in Santa Barbara. As I know this is financially difficult to achieve these days on 2 professional incomes, right now, my big question is, do I want to put hundreds of thousands of dollars into my property and incur more property tax when my neighborhood is at risk for continued endless parties, numerous parked vehicles, and vacationers' overall general lack of respect for our peace and quiet? What a big task this is before us. I am present today to affirm my support for the elimination of short-term rentals in the coastal zone. I'm in agreement with the map that was presented today. It's my desperate plea that I ask for you to take this opportunity like many other California coastal communities, to eliminate them altogether. Please leave our neighborhoods for folks who actually live, work, and contribute to our community, and leave the hotels for visitors. That's what commercial zones are created for. I also want to tell you that I have a housekeeper also, and many of the people who do support this ordinance do have housekeepers. Also, I really don't believe these folks who are against it are concerned about the TOT taxes and the budget for Santa Barbara. I think they're more concerned about their own pockets. Thanks so much.
Ken Grand, followed by Gail Ward. Ken Grand. Okay, Gail Ward.
Hi, good afternoon. I've lived and owned a home on the Mesa since 1976, so I'm very familiar with it. As just a point, local residents, as Georgia said, also have gardeners, housekeepers, maintenance workers. We support our local community. We have those things just like everybody else. Secondly, short-term rental people are not our neighbors. They keep saying, we're good neighbors, but you're not a neighbor. I kind of blew my mind when I heard you say it was possible to have an all-out band of short-term rentals like Anaheim, Belvedere, Carmel, Danville, Del Mar, Hermosa Beach, Huntington Beach, Larkspur, Manhattan Beach, Ojai, Rancho Palos Verdes, Redondo Beach, San Juan Capistrano, Sausalito, Scotts Valley, Tiburon, West Hollywood. Oh boy, that would be a dream, but it might be just a dream. We've had a few short-term rentals on our cul-de-sac for a few years, but it really turned personal for me when my house next door, which can accommodate 10 overnight guests, has no garage, has a very short driveway, which they do park tandemly in occasionally, but with that many overnight guests, plus allowed to have 6 other guests during the day, and then many others, I guess, we don't know who they are. They're not our neighbors, and they come for a celebration. Probably would be less expensive, but they spill out onto our street. We need more long-term rentals, not workforce. We love it when a young family moves in. We just relish them and want them to stay because that helps with our fabric. Thank you very much.
Ellen Stoddard, followed by Jarrett Gorin. Jarrett Gorin's been given time by Kelly Egan.
Good afternoon, council members. I've lived on the Mesa for almost 50 years. I have a legally permitted ADU, which I rent long-term. I'm very much in favor of some type of ordinance to regulate these vacation rentals. Every short-term rental diminishes the residential neighborhood. Short-term rentals take away long-term housing from people who need it. Short-term rentals compromise the peaceful enjoyment of our homes, and short-term rentals reduce the safety and the camaraderie that comes from knowing our neighbors. I know this ordinance is controversial, and not everyone is going to be happy with whatever decision that you make. However, when the dust settles, I hope you will support the residents who are trying to protect our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Jarrett Gorin. Jarrett's been given time by Kelly Egan. Jarrett will get 3 minutes.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jarrett Gorin from Vanguard Planning, and I do represent some short-term rental clients, but today I'm really speaking to you as a planner. I've been a regular participant in the city's public review process for over 25 years. And the way this ordinance is being handled, it's really unique in my experience. I've never seen the city rush something through like this before, where the city's goal appears to be adopting the ordinance by a specific date rather than taking the time to get it right. I attended the Planning Commission hearing back in March, and here's what was obvious to everyone who watched that hearing. The commissioners had major concerns about this. They wanted more critical data and information. They wanted staff to look at entirely different ordinance concepts, like using the licensed lottery system, similar to what other coastal cities like Carpinteria are doing successfully. Normally in a situation like this, the commission sends the ordinance back to staff to get the additional information, rework things, bring it back to them. evaluate the alternatives. And for example, the ADU ordinance went to Planning Commission a couple of times before they felt it was ready to move it forward to your committee. It looked like that was probably what's going to happen in this case too, until the city attorney stood up and basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, we just don't have time to look into the things that you're concerned about. City council wants to vote on this in May. And so the commission voted to send this forward, but they had a lot of reservations, and they sent it forward with this laundry list of things to ask about. So there's major concepts in this ordinance that were initially discussed last summer. It's astounding to see that it's here less than a year later. That's faster than the city processes permits for a single-family residence. Okay, that makes me feel like there's something unusual going on here. If you contrast that with the single-family streamlining ordinance revisions, which are coming to council this afternoon, those got kicked off at Planning Commission in March of 2024. So that's nearly 2 full years later. It's not a secret that there's a push to get this to the Coastal Commission fast while Councilmember Harmon's on there. It's one thing to say, you know, we have a person who serves on council and on Coastal Commission, and so they can look at this ordinance. It's another thing entirely to say we have to get this there to make sure she's there to vote yes on this when it gets there. And whether or not that's the city's intent, that's the public's perception, and that's not a good thing. So I think planning and commissioner concerns and public comments are taking a back seat to schedule. This isn't ready to move forward. I mean, just based on stuff that you're hearing here today, I don't see how this could possibly move forward, and I really request that your committee send this back down to the Planning Commission so it can get finished right and come here fully baked, and we need to get this right. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you to
Rafferty.
refrain from applauding or booing. Thank you.
Lori Rafferty, followed by Casey Williamson. Lori Rafferty?
On your mark, get set, go. Okay. Hi, my name is Lori Rafferty. I'm a 50-year resident of Santa Barbara, 20 years living on the Mesa as a renter, and 30 years currently living in the Yankee Farm, Braemar Ranch area. So I've seen a few cycles of housing, drought, fires, floods, tourism going up and down, you name it. And this has been a long time in coming. I think that the city's been trying to get something through legally to combat and save housing in our residential neighborhoods. When we bought our house, we did our due diligence. It said, single-family residential neighborhood. Never in our wildest dreams would we think anybody would come in and start, quote-unquote, a business. So you got to do your due diligence when you buy housing. Secondly, the one thing I want to bring up, we've looked past in 2019 LCP, and then the recently thing that Brandy brought up about discussing high fire areas. And in our area, it's a coastal high fire area designation. We did not design that. It's through, you know, Cal Fire, city, county. It's for a reason. With home shares, I'm kind of concerned about the enforcement because I do support the changes to the ordinance. Are you going to have requirements that you can have no outdoor fire pit? Are you going to have requirements that the whole house should be upgraded to fire standards of whole house, what do you call it, hard wiring with fire alarms, that sort of thing? I think it's been omitted. It needs to be addressed. And short-term rentals would obviously be a legally problematic thing to have in a coastal hot fire zone. So it is what it is, and everybody took a risk to buy something, but housing is housing. Thank you.
Casey Williamson, followed by Hillary Wells.
If I may, I'll have my lovely wife go first.
Thank you. My name's Hillary Wells. I am one of those people with a vacation rental on the Mesa. My husband and I operate it. We live a couple miles away. We can respond to anything. Our neighbors know that they can reach us at a moment's notice. And we've been successfully running our vacation rental for 5 years. This is my 2026 business license. Also, it says the business tax license, and it requires that I post this with the name of the vacation rental in my vacation rental. The entire time we've been doing it for 5 years, we've been under the impression we were operating in good faith. We had no idea that there was a confusion, because how we got the business license was after the Cracky case. We had learned that there was one specific area where we were already buying and that we could do a vacation rental if we were going to be traveling. That is when I went to the city, got my business license. I had to prove that we were in that area on the Mesa by Shoreline, where now you're proposing home shares. I can tell you that we will never do a home share. The houses there are tiny. 2-bedroom house is what we have. People are going to not be interested in staying with somebody else most of the time, and we sure are not interested in having people stay with us during that time. The fantasies that you're going to be getting tot tax that equals what we're making, what we pay. I pay $15,000 to $20,000 a year in tot taxes, and that's all going to go away. I do not believe that there'll be very many home shares at all. I'm pleased to hear a few people say that they have done it. So I'm really hoping that you will find a way to honor those people, such as ourselves, who have been acting in good faith, who have been doing a wonderful job with our community. We know our neighbors, and we hope that you'll grandfather us in.
Casey Williamson, followed by Bill Stark.
Good afternoon. I am a resident of Santa Barbara for over 50 years, came here to go to UCSB, and I know the feeling of trying to look for a affordable rental. I lived with roommates until late in my 30s. We oppose the proposed law as they are trying to push it through. I do agree with the previous person who said it was kind of pushed through unprepared. But I do agree also that the idea that you're going to have home shares is going to replace the availability to people who are not in our town is completely ephemeral. I'm guessing that all of you have stayed in Airbnbs before. Ask yourself whether you and your family would want to go and stay at a place where someone else is present. You're sharing the kitchen, maybe sharing the bathroom. Not going to happen. Maybe in your early 20s when you're backpacking that happens, but that's not going to happen for families who are coming here from inland. I was wondering whether the availability of short-term rentals is going to affect really people being able to move in and have shorter, available housing. And it turns out that the stats don't show that. But I do have an idea that I want to share with you in my 29 seconds. And that is, I looked up how much money is coming in from to TOT based on just the short-term rentals. And it's about $4 million. So I propose that that money be dedicated to the housing for low-income people. And that would be $4 or $5 million, which would push the city over the limit to get the state fees for low-income housing, which is going to produce about $40 million. That will drastically help.
Bill Stark, followed by Patricia Stark.
I support the ordinance's protection of residential neighborhoods. My wife and I have lived in our Mesa home for 33 years. In recent years, 3 homes on our one block have changed from being homes to being short-term rentals. STRs are clearly commercial enterprises, but advocates for STRs claim they should be allowed to operate in residential areas. Why should these commercial enterprises be allowed on zoned residential properties? These properties do not provide residential housing. In most cases, they have taken away residential housing, changing it to non-residential use for short-term visitors. STR advocates claim these are often mom-and-pop operations. But if mom-and-pop wanted to open a restaurant or a market or a small motel on a residentially zoned property, the city would not allow it. The city would not allow it because these businesses belong in commercial areas. Why should there be a carve-out for STR businesses? Currently, there is a strong incentive for home sellers to sell to buyers who want to convert homes to STRs. These buyers are willing to pay more for these homes because there's more money to be made from short-term rentals than from long-term homes. The Cracky decision has crippled city enforcement. This has caused residential real estate prices to rise and housing availability to fall, even as the state requires more residential housing. Currently, many residential neighborhoods are transforming into mini motel zones. Undoing this damage will no doubt cost the city TOT, at least until STRs have migrated to zones where they are appropriate. I support the city's efforts to keep residential neighborhoods residential. Thank you.
Patricia Stark, followed by Mary Turley.
Good afternoon. I've twice now spoken about the changes. I've twice now spoken publicly, many times privately, about the changes the influx of vacation rentals has wrought on our neighborhood and our quality of life. So the Cracky decision, in itself a result of flawed city planning, which I'm happy to say you're trying to correct today, left the door wide open for real estate investors to exploit the Mesa for huge financial gain. It also left us residents, the people who voted for you, with little to no protection. Now is the time for you to correct this. Because of their windfall, investors and property managers claim that 67% of the city's visitor-serving capacity would be lost with this ordinance. If this unsourced percentage is correct, it means the Mesa is oversaturated with most of the city's overnight accommodations. This also needs to be corrected, Your staff is projecting the ordinance would cost up to $2.4 million in taxes this first year. Again, in the interest of the residents who voted for you, I ask you to accept this short-term loss. Investors claim, with only anecdotal evidence, that owners would simply keep their properties vacant. But there's ample evidence that the lack of housing stock is there for renters and buyers. When sold, these houses would become homes to residents who will shop, recreate, worship, go to school, pay property taxes, and generate income for local businesses and city government. Isn't that permanence better than a tenuous income source that was based on the city's lack of planning foresight and outsized investor profits? Finally, in 7 minutes, take a quick look at the platforms which debunk the assertion that Mesa Vacation Rentals are providing low-cost housing. Thank you.
Mary Turley, followed by Samantha Ireland.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez and Ordinance Committee members. My name is Mary Turley. I'm a 40-year resident of Santa Barbara and the Mesa. I am president of the Allied Neighborhoods Association, and I'm here on behalf of the association. So I'm not here just as an individual. There are more people in support of what you're doing. And Allied Neighborhoods is an alliance of neighborhood associations, and we've been working for 5 decades to preserve and protect the city and its neighborhoods through conservation and good planning. We have followed this issue since the very successful short-term rental enforcement program, and we are very pleased to hear about the proposed ordinance amendments today. We're also pleased to see the thoughtful consideration that has gone into the ordinance. They are comprehensive, and it's what is needed. The Santa Barbara City Housing Element specifically directs the City of Santa Barbara to develop short-term rental ordinance, to regulate the location and permitting of vacation rentals, to incentivize long-term housing over transitory use. This is not a big surprise. It is specified in the housing element. These ordinances will protect neighborhoods, alleviate existing nuisance issues, allow these homes to become available for long-term occupancy. These ordinances will reduce the financial incentive to purchase homes for business operations and financial gain, thereby removing this added upward pressure on house prices in an already expensive housing market. We urge you to review and forward the amendments to the short-term rental ordinances to council. Thank you for your time.
Samantha Ireland, followed by Emily No.
Good afternoon, committees. Thank you for your time. My name is Samantha Ireland, and I own Vacation Rentals of Santa Barbara, and we've offered responsible management for vacation rentals for almost 20 years here in Santa Barbara. I want to focus on one very real consequence of this ordinance. It's the loss of transitory occupancy tax revenue to the city. The city earns an estimated $3 to $4 million annually in TOT from short-term rentals, and that funding supports essential city services such as public safety, infrastructure, and community programs. If this ordinance effectively eliminates most STRs, I respectfully ask, how will the city replace that revenue? And if it can't, what services will be reduced or cut? Is it fire department? Is it police? Is it my grandchildren's city camp programs through the recreation? Is it low-cost housing, affordable housing? What is going to be cut to make that up? Or are you just going to raise taxes elsewhere? There is also a serious issue with feasibility in the areas where STRs may still be allowed. Existing operators will be required to go through the proposed permitting process, which we already know won't work based on all of the comments here today. In the past 9 years, only 24 permits have been issued. The potential is not relevant, as most homes will not be able to get through the permitting process. So don't look at potential. Why? Because requirements like parking make compliance nearly impossible. So in reality, this ordinance doesn't just reduce STRs, it eliminates nearly all of them, leaving only a handful that were permitted years ago. Will the Coastal Commission approve this minimal number? I think not. Home shares will not solve this either. Please take the time to review this before sending it on. Thank you.
Emily No, followed by Louise Asbury.
Hi, my name is Emily No, and I manage operations for Vacation Rentals of Santa Barbara. Our company has been around for nearly 20 years, as Samantha said, and we are passionate about serving our community and being good neighbors. We manage a portfolio of 85 properties, and all 18 of our employees are local members of the community. We care deeply for the neighborhoods we operate in and have a 24/7 property emergency line so that any rare issues with guests are dealt with swiftly, no matter the time of day. We also ensure that all guests are vetted and understand local rules and regulations. We are in support of fair regulations. However, the proposed ordinance as it stands has many flaws, one of which being the home share option. This is not a viable option because it is very unsavory for travelers and homeowners alike. No one wants to go on vacation with their whole family and then share a kitchen or a bathroom with strangers. The idea of including the home share option to appease the California Coastal Commission sidesteps the actual need for affordable, sustainable housing in the California coastal zone. Home sharing is affordable, but it is not wildly attractive nor sustainable. I also want to note that there is not currently a successful example of similar ordinances enacted in similar coastal towns. So how do we know that this one will be successful? However, we do know that the lottery, capped, and density STR regulations are very successful, and why aren't we pursuing similar options? The proposed ordinance stands to make Santa Barbara more exclusive and more expensive, which is not the kind of Santa Barbara I believe in. I appreciate the city staff's time in researching and working on this issue, but I urge the commission to not pass it through as it is. Thank you.
Louise Asbury, followed by Eve Leeds.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Louise Astbury, and I am General Manager of Paradise Retreats here in Santa Barbara. I've already spoken a couple of times as to why there are so many reasons this shouldn't go through. Our owners would never live in their homes while guests were staying there as well. They all use their homes all the time when guests are not in their homes, and they're just renting them out to offset the costs of the high costs of living here in Santa Barbara. It won't add to long-term housing. All of that aside, I'm mostly baffled how I've sat through 2 meetings and there were 6 planning commission members up here, and all 6 had these major reservations. And until the last minute, it looked like this would be sent back to the staff writers, and at the very last minute, it was pushed through. And, you know, talking about the parking restrictions, the economic studies that needs to be done, whether this should be thrown out and start again with the density caps and the lottery system. I know that Laura has had a rough road ahead, and it hasn't been an easy job, and I thank you for your work on this, but to watch a slide up here saying that it would take 4 months more work to do this, shouldn't we be doing it right? Shouldn't the time be invested? I have 40 seconds, but all I need to say is if anyone didn't see that Lucille Boss herself, the chair of the Planning Commission, stood up here and said that this shouldn't go through until more work is done, I really hope that logic and reason and the voices and opinions of those who are appointed to
Let's take a minute here. Sorry, there's a fall in the chambers for the viewers at home.
They'll give it back.
Luckily, we got our first responders in the room already. But let's take a minute to compose ourselves here. Okay, ma'am, if you could finish your comments, but I just want to let everyone know that we're going to continue this meeting to the next ordinance committee meeting, just so that we have time to set up for the 2 o'clock council meeting.
I was almost done, but I was just going to say I would hope that the voices of those appointed to the commission and to your committee outweigh disgruntled neighbors. My parents live at the top of Yankee Farm Road and weren't even aware that short-term rentals existed there until they received an email to ban against it. So thank you for your time.
Okay, so as we're aware, we didn't get through all of public comment, so I'm going to make the motion to continue this to next week. Can I get a second from one of my colleagues? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we did say that next week would work for continuance. We have the oversized vehicles ordinance, but I think we should be able to continue this item and still hear that item. We'll probably start a little earlier for ordinance committee, and yeah, so we'll make sure that that is noticed, yeah.
All right, stay tuned for that double feature. So yeah, I make the motion to continue. Do I get a second?
I have a question. So
just a moment,
wait a
Councilmember.
we don't
Joel
have
has
much
a question.
earlier. If that closed session is still on the schedule, can we, I mean, I don't think 2 hours is enough again, personally. So I mean, either you got to reduce or remove that closed session or put it off another week.
Okay, we will, the closed session is important. There's time-sensitive litigation we need to discuss next week, so we will work internally with, as a staff team and figure out which of the item, how we manage the agenda for next week.
Yeah, my feeling is it's still a two-hour.
Yeah, we do
plus
want to make
meeting.
sure to continue it so we don't have to renotice this item and spend that money, so that would be great if we could just vote to continue it to next week.
Okay. So I made the motion, Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon seconded.
Recommendation moved by Chair Gutierrez, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon to continue this meeting to next Tuesday, time to be determined. Okay, we'll go ahead and take a vote just to make it official.
Okay, that passes unanimously. I want to thank everyone for showing up, and we'll see you next week. I continue this meeting.